Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside Romano's restaurant. His hands shook as he looked through the big glass windows. Inside, people sat at fancy tables with white cloth. They wore nice clothes and ate expensive food. The smell of garlic and fresh bread came through the door every time someone walked in or out. Marcus had not eaten in 2 days. His stomach made loud noises that hurt. His old jacket had holes in it. His shoes were falling apart. People walked past him on the busy street. They did not look at him. They acted like he was not there. He reached into his pocket and felt around. $3.47. That was all the money he had left in the world. It was not enough to buy even the cheapest thing on the menu at Romano's. He knew this because he had looked at the prices on the menu posted by the door. But Marcus saw something else through the window that made his heart beat faster. In the corner of the restaurant sat an old black piano. It looked like no one had played it in a long time. Dust covered the top. Some of the chairs around it had boxes stacked on them. But Marcus could see that it was a real piano, a good one. He had been walking around the city for 3 hours. He had asked for help at 5 other restaurants. All of them said no. Some were mean about it, others just ignored him. One man told him to get a job. Another woman called him lazy. But none of them knew who Marcus really was. None of them knew what he could do. Marcus took a deep breath. He walked to the front door of Romano's. A young woman in a black dress stood behind a small table. She had a big smile on her face. But when she saw Marcus, her smile went away fast. "Excuse me," Marcus said. His voice was quiet and rough. "I was wondering if I could speak to the manager." The hostess looked him up and down. She saw his dirty clothes and messy hair. She saw how thin he was. Her nose wrinkled up like she smelled something bad. "Sir, this is a high-end restaurant," she said. Her voice was cold. "I think you might be more comfortable somewhere else." Marcus felt his face get hot. But he did not give up. "Please," he said. "I just need to ask one question. It will only take a minute." The hostess looked around. Some of the people eating dinner were starting to look their way. She did not want to make a scene. "Wait here," she said. She walked away fast. Marcus stood by the door. He could hear the sounds of the restaurant, people talking and laughing, forks hitting plates, wine being poured into glasses. He could smell the food. His stomach hurt even more. A few minutes later, a short man with gray hair came to the door. He wore a nice suit and had a gold watch. This was Mr. Romano, the owner of the restaurant. "What do you want?" Mr. Romano asked. He did not sound friendly. Marcus pointed to the piano in the corner. "I see you have a piano," he said. "I was wondering if I could play it for you, just for a little while." Mr. Romano laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "You want to play our piano? Do you know how much that piano costs?" "I do know something about pianos," Marcus said. "And I can play. I play well." "I bet you do," Mr. Romano said. He was still laughing. "And what do you want in return for this concert?" Marcus felt his face get red again. This was the hard part, the part that made him feel small. "Just a plate of food," he said. "Anything you have. Even leftovers would be fine." Mr. Romano stopped laughing. He stared at Marcus for a long time. Other people in the restaurant were watching now. Some of them were whispering to each other. "You want to play my piano for food?" Mr. Romano asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "I have not eaten in 2 days. I am not asking for money, just some food. I will play whatever you want to hear." The hostess came back. She had been listening. "Mr. Romano," she whispered. "Should I call the police?" Mr. Romano held up his hand. He was thinking. He looked at Marcus again. Then he looked at his customers. Some of them seemed interested in what was happening. Others looked upset. "You really think you can play that piano?" Mr. Romano asked. "I know I can," Marcus said. "Give me a chance. If you do not like what you hear, I will leave right away. I will not bother you again." Mr. Romano looked at the piano. He had bought it 3 years ago. He thought it would make his restaurant feel more classy. but nobody ever played it. It just sat there, taking up space. "This is crazy," the hostess said under her breath. But Mr. Romano was curious now. He had. Never had anyone asked to play for food before. And some of his customers seemed interested too. Maybe it would be good for business. Maybe people would tell their friends about the crazy thing that happened at Romano's. "Fine," Mr. Romano said. "You can play, but if you are not good, you leave right away. And if you break anything, you will be in big trouble." Marcus felt relief wash over him like warm water. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," Mr. Romano said. "Show me what you can do first." Marcus walked into the restaurant. People stared at him as he passed their tables. Some whispered to each other. Others took pictures with their phones. A few people looked angry that a homeless man was in their fancy restaurant. The piano sat in the corner like it was waiting for him. Marcus walked over to it slowly. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. He had not played a real piano in 6 months. The last time was in a music store before the owner kicked him out. He pulled out the bench and sat down. The piano was a beautiful old Steinway. It was the same kind he used to play when he was famous, when he had money and a nice house and people who loved him. Marcus put his hands on the keys but did not press them yet. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. All around him the restaurant was getting quiet. People were waiting to see what would happen. He thought about all the times he had played piano before, when he was young and his mother would listen with tears in her eyes, when he played in big concert halls and people clapped for 10 minutes, when music was his whole world and nothing else mattered. Now he was here, dirty and hungry and alone, playing for a plate of food in front of people who thought he was just a crazy homeless man. But the piano was still the piano, and he was still Marcus. Deep inside, where it mattered, he was still the same person who could make magic happen with his fingers on the keys. He opened his eyes. He looked out at all the faces watching him. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. It was time to show them who he really was. Nobody in the restaurant knew who Marcus really was. They saw a thin man with dirty clothes and messy hair. They thought he was just another homeless person trying to get free food. But Marcus had a secret. A big secret that would shock everyone in that room. 20 years ago, Marcus was not homeless. He was famous. Very famous. His full name was Marcus Alexander Chen. When he was just 16 years old, he became the youngest student ever accepted into Juilliard School of Music in New York City. This was a very big deal. Most students were much older when they got into this famous school. Marcus had been playing piano since he was 4 years old. His mother, Linda, was a piano teacher. His father, David, played violin in the city orchestra. They lived in a small apartment, but it was filled with music every day. Marcus would wake up to his father practicing violin. He would fall asleep to his mother playing soft piano songs. When Marcus first touched the piano keys as a little boy, something magic happened. The music came out of him like water from a spring. He did not have to think about it. His small fingers just knew where to go. His parents knew right away that their son was special. By age 10, Marcus was playing music that most adults could not play. By age 12, he was winning competitions all over the country. When he was 14, a famous piano teacher heard him play. She told his parents that Marcus had to go to Juilliard. She said he was the most talented young person she had ever heard, but Juilliard was expensive. Very expensive. Marcus's parents were not rich. His mother taught piano lessons to children in their neighborhood. His father made some money playing violin, but not very much. They worked extra jobs to save money for Marcus's education. Marcus's mother cleaned offices at night after teaching piano all day. His father played music at weddings and parties on weekends. They both worked so hard that Marcus sometimes did not see them for whole days. But they never complained. They knew their son had a gift that could change his life. When Marcus was 16, he finally made it to Juilliard. He was the youngest student in his class. The other students were jealous of how easily music came to him. While they had to practice for hours to learn a new song, Marcus could play it perfectly after hearing it just once. His teachers at Juilliard were amazed. They said Marcus did not just play music, he became the music. When he played happy songs, everyone in the room felt happy. When he played sad songs, people would cry. He had a special power to make people feel things through his music. When Marcus was 19, he played his first big concert at Carnegie Hall in New York City. This is one of the most famous concert halls in the world. Only the very best musicians get to play there. The concert hall was completely full. Over 2,000 people came to hear Marcus play. That night, Marcus played like an angel. The audience was completely quiet during his performance. When he finished, they jumped up and clapped for 15 minutes. People threw flowers on the stage. The newspaper writers said it was the best piano concert they had ever heard. After that night, Marcus became very famous very fast. He played concerts all over America. Then he went to Europe and played in London, Paris, and Vienna. Rich people paid thousands of dollars to hear him play. He made so much money that he bought his parents a big house. He bought himself a fancy apartment with 3 pianos in it. For 5 years, Marcus lived like a king. He had everything he wanted: nice clothes, expensive cars, and people who said they loved him. He played with the best orchestras in the world. Famous composers wrote new music just for him to play. Everyone said he would be one of the greatest piano players who ever lived. But then everything changed. It happened on a rainy Tuesday night, in March. Marcus was supposed to play a concert in Chicago the next day. He was staying in a hotel, practicing for the show. His parents were driving from their home to come hear him play. Marcus got a phone call at 11:30 that night. It was a police officer. The officer told him there had been a bad car accident. A drunk driver had hit his parents' car. Both of his parents were dead. Marcus's world fell apart that night. The 2 people he loved most in the world were gone. The people who had worked so hard to help him become famous. The people who believed in him more than anyone else. They would never hear him play again. After the funeral, Marcus could not play piano anymore. Every time he sat down at the piano, he thought about his parents. He thought about how they would never hear him play again. The music that used to flow out of him like water just stopped. He canceled all his concerts. He stopped answering his phone. He stayed in his apartment for months. His friends tried to help him, but he would not see anyone. He just sat in his room, staring at his 3 pianos but never touching them. Without concerts, Marcus had no money coming in. But he still had to pay for his expensive apartment and his cars. His savings started to disappear. He had to sell his cars first. Then he sold 2 of his pianos. Then he sold most of his expensive clothes and jewelry. But the worst part was not the money. The worst part was that Marcus forgot how to be happy. He forgot how to hope for good things. He forgot how to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. He just felt empty inside, like someone had taken out his heart and left a big hole. After 2 years, Marcus had spent all his money. He had to sell his apartment and move to a small, cheap room. He tried to get jobs, but he had never learned how to do anything except play piano. And he still could not make himself play. He got a job washing dishes in a restaurant. Then he lost that job because he was too sad to work well. He got another job cleaning buildings at night. He lost that job too. Slowly, Marcus fell from being rich and famous to being poor and forgotten. People who used to call him a genius now did not even know his name. The newspapers that used to write about his concerts forgot he existed. The concert halls that used to beg him to play did not call anymore. 5 years after his parents died, Marcus was living on the streets. He slept in parks and under bridges. He ate food from garbage cans. Sometimes people would give him money, but most people just walked past him like he was invisible. But even when he was homeless and hungry, Marcus never completely forgot about music. Sometimes, late at night when he was alone, he would hear songs in his head. Beautiful songs that made him remember what it felt like to be alive. He would move his fingers like he was playing piano, even though there was no piano there. Now, sitting at the piano in Romano's restaurant, all of those memories came back to him. He remembered his parents and how proud they were of him. He remembered the feeling of playing music that made people cry with joy. He remembered who he used to be before everything fell apart. The people in the restaurant were still staring at him. They were waiting to see if this strange homeless man could really play piano. They had no idea that they were about to hear one of the greatest piano players who ever lived. Marcus put his fingers on the keys. After 5 years of silence, he was ready to play again. He was ready to show the world that even though he had lost everything else, the music was still inside him. It had been waiting all this time for him to find it again. The piano felt like coming home. Marcus sat at the piano bench and closed his eyes for a moment. His heart was beating so fast it felt like it might jump out of his chest. All around him, the restaurant was getting quieter. People were stopping their conversations to watch what would happen next. He opened his eyes and looked down at the piano keys. They were black and white, just like every piano he had ever played. But these keys felt different somehow. They felt like old friends he had not seen in a very long time. Marcus lifted his hands and held them over the keys. His fingers were shaking a little bit, not from being scared, but from excitement. It had been so long since he had touched a real piano, so long since he had made real music. The restaurant was almost completely quiet now. Even the people in the kitchen had stopped working to see what the homeless man would do. The only sounds were the soft clinking of glasses and the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus took a deep breath and pressed down on the first key. The note that came out was clear and beautiful. It filled the whole restaurant like a bird singing in a quiet forest. That one note was perfect, pure. It sounded like hope. Then Marcus began to play a song. Not just any song, but one of the most beautiful songs ever written. It was called Clair de Lune by a composer named Debussy. The name means moonlight in French. It was a song about peaceful, quiet beauty. As soon as Marcus started playing, something magical happened in the restaurant. The music seemed to wrap around everyone like a soft blanket. People who had been talking stopped in the middle of their sentences. Waiters who had been walking around with plates of food just stood still and listened. Marcus's fingers moved across the keys like they were dancing. He did not have to think about what notes to play. The music just flowed out of him like water from a fountain. His whole body moved with the rhythm of the song. His eyes were closed, and he had a peaceful smile on his face. The song started very softly, like a whisper. Then it got a little bit louder, like someone speaking gently to a friend. Marcus played each note with perfect timing. Every sound was exactly where it should be. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. It was like listening to an angel. At table number 4, an old woman named Mrs. Patterson put down her fork. She had been eating birthday dinner with her family, but now she forgot all about her food. She had tears in her eyes. The music was so beautiful that it reminded her of her husband, who had died 2 years ago. He used to love piano music. At the bar, a young man named Tom stopped trying to impress his date with funny stories. Both of them just listened to the music. Tom's date, Sarah, felt like the music was speaking directly to her heart. She had never heard anything so beautiful in her whole life. The waiters stood frozen with plates balanced on their hands. Maria, who had been working at Romano's for 3 years, felt goosebumps on her arms. She had served thousands of meals in this restaurant, but nothing like this had ever happened before. In the kitchen, the chef came out to see what was going on. When he heard the music, he turned off all the stoves and told his workers to stop cooking. "Just listen," he whispered. "Just listen to this." Even Mr. Romano, the owner who had laughed at Marcus just a few minutes ago, stood completely still. His mouth was open in surprise. He had bought the piano 3 years ago because he thought it would make his restaurant look fancy. But he had never heard it played like this. He had never known it could sound so incredible. Marcus played the middle part of the song, where the melody gets more emotional. His fingers pressed the keys harder now, and the music filled every corner of the restaurant. It bounced off the walls and surrounded everyone like they were sitting inside a music box. The hostess who had been rude to Marcus was now crying. She felt terrible about how she had treated him. She could tell just from listening that this was not an ordinary person. This was someone very special, someone who could make magic with his hands. At table 12, a little girl was eating dinner with her grandmother. The little girl stopped eating her ice cream and just stared at Marcus with big, wide eyes. "Grandma," she whispered, "is that man an angel?" Her grandmother smiled and wiped away a tear. "I think he might be, sweetie. I think he might be." As Marcus played, he started to remember things he had forgotten. He remembered being a little boy and playing piano for his mother. He remembered her face when she listened to him play. She would always smile and tell him that his music made her heart happy. He remembered playing in big concert halls where thousands of people came to hear him. He remembered how quiet the audience would get when he played soft, beautiful songs, like this one. He remembered feeling like the luckiest person in the world because he could make people happy just by pressing piano keys. But most of all, he remembered why he had loved music so much. It was not because it made him famous or rich. It was because music could say things that words could not say. Music could make people feel things that nothing else could make them feel. Music was like a language that everyone in the world could understand, no matter where they came from. The song was getting close to the end now. Marcus played the last part very softly, like he was tucking everyone in the restaurant into bed with a lullaby. Each note was gentle and perfect. The music got quieter and quieter until finally Marcus played the very last note. Then there was silence. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed very loudly. The last note hung in the air like a star in the night sky. Marcus kept his hands on the keys for a few more seconds. Then he slowly lifted them and put them in his lap. He opened his eyes and looked around the restaurant. Every single person was staring at him. Every single person had the same look on their face. It was the look of someone who had just seen something impossible. For a moment, nobody knew what to do. The music had been so beautiful that it felt wrong to break the silence with clapping or talking. It felt like the moment after seeing the most beautiful sunset of your life when you just want to stand still and remember it forever. Marcus looked around at all the faces. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others just looked shocked. A few people looked like they could not believe what they had just heard. He had done it. After 5 years of not playing, after 5 years of being lost and forgotten, he had played music again, and it was just as beautiful as it had ever been, maybe even more beautiful because now he knew what it felt like to lose everything and find it again. The magic was still there. The gift was still inside him. And for the first time in 5 long years, Marcus felt like himself again. The silence in the restaurant felt like it could last forever. But Marcus knew that in a few seconds something would happen. People would react. They would clap or they would cry or they would ask him questions. But right now, in this perfect moment of silence, Marcus just felt grateful. Grateful that he could still play. Grateful that people could still hear the beauty in his music. Grateful that even though he had lost so much, the most important thing of all was still there, waiting inside him like a treasure that could never be stolen. The moment of truth was over, and Marcus had passed the test. The silence lasted for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 seconds. Then something wonderful happened. One person started clapping, then another person, then another. Soon the whole restaurant was clapping so loud it sounded like thunder. But Marcus was not done yet. He had only played one song and he could see in people's eyes that they wanted more. He wanted more too. After 5 years without music, his fingers felt hungry for the piano keys. His heart felt hungry for the sounds only he could make. Marcus put his hands back on the piano keys. The clapping stopped right away. Everyone wanted to hear what he would play next. He looked around the restaurant and saw all the faces watching him. Young people and old people, rich people in expensive clothes, working people still wearing their uniforms from their jobs. He decided to play something different this time, something that would show everyone just how good he really was. He chose a piece by Chopin called Fantaisie Impromptu. This was one of the hardest piano pieces ever written. Most piano players could not play it well even after practicing for years. Marcus started playing, and right away everyone could tell this was different from the first song. His fingers moved incredibly fast across the keys. They looked like they were flying. The music was like a river rushing down a mountain. It was powerful and exciting and beautiful all at the same time. The people in the restaurant had never seen anything like it. Marcus's left hand played a steady rhythm while his right hand played a melody that danced all around it. Sometimes the two hands seemed to be playing completely different songs, but somehow they fit together perfectly. At table 7, a man named Robert was a piano teacher at the local college. He taught piano to students who thought they were pretty good. But watching Marcus play, Robert realized that his best student could not do in a lifetime what Marcus was doing right now. This was not just good piano playing. This was genius. Marcus's whole body moved with the music. His shoulders swayed back and forth. His head moved up and down with the rhythm. Sometimes he would lean forward toward the piano like he was telling it a secret. Other times he would lean back like he was laughing with an old friend. The music got faster and more exciting. Marcus's fingers were moving so quickly that they looked like a blur. But every single note was perfect. Every sound was exactly where it should be. He was not just playing the piano. He was making the piano sing and dance and fly. At table 3, a teenage girl named Emma was studying music in high school. She had been learning piano for 8 years and thought she was getting pretty good. But watching Marcus, she realized she had never really understood what piano playing could be. This was like watching someone paint with sounds instead of colors. The waiters had completely forgotten about their jobs. They stood holding their trays and watched Marcus with their mouths open. One waiter named Carlos had been working in restaurants for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. He felt like he was watching a magician perform impossible tricks. In the kitchen, all the cooks had stopped working. The chef, whose name was Antonio, came out to watch. Antonio had been to many fancy concerts in his life, but he had never heard piano playing this good. He whispered to one of his workers, "This man is not normal. This is something special." Marcus played the hardest part of the song, where both hands had to do completely different things at the same time. Most piano players had to slow down during this part because it was so difficult. But Marcus made it look easy. His hands moved like they had minds of their own. Like they knew exactly what to do without him even thinking about it. The music filled every inch of the restaurant. It bounced off the walls and ceiling. It seemed to make the air itself vibrate with beauty. People could feel the music in their chests, in their hearts, in their bones. An old man at table 9 started crying. His name was Frank, and he was 82 years old. He had fought in a war when he was young, and he had seen many terrible things. But this music made him remember that there was still beauty in the world, that there were still things worth living for. Marcus reached the part of the song where the melody became very soft and gentle. After all the fast, exciting music, this part was like a quiet prayer. His fingers touched the keys so lightly that the notes seemed to float in the air like soap bubbles. A young mother at table 5 was holding her baby daughter. The baby had been crying and fussing all through dinner. But when Marcus started playing the soft part of the song, the baby became completely quiet. She stared at Marcus with big, curious eyes, like she was trying to understand where such beautiful sounds were coming from. Then Marcus built the music back up to the exciting, fast part again. But this time, it was even more powerful than before. His whole body was moving with the rhythm. Sweat was starting to show on his forehead, but he was smiling like he had never been happier in his life. The people watching him could see that this was not just someone playing piano for money or for food. This was someone who lived and breathed music. Someone for whom playing piano was like breathing or having a heartbeat. Something that was part of who he was deep down inside. Mr. Romano, the restaurant owner, stood behind the bar with his mouth hanging open. He was thinking about all the times he had hired piano players for special events at his restaurant. He had paid them hundreds of dollars to play for a few hours, but none of them had been even 1/10 as good as this homeless man who was playing for just a plate of food. Marcus played the final part of the song, where all the different melodies came together in a rush of beautiful sound. His fingers flew across the keys like lightning. The music got louder and more exciting until it felt like the whole restaurant might lift off the ground and fly away. Then, with one final powerful chord, the song ended. Marcus's hands came down on the keys, one last time, and the sound filled the restaurant like an explosion of joy. This time the silence that followed was even deeper than before. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The music had been so incredible that people needed a moment just to understand what they had heard. Marcus sat at the piano bench, breathing hard. Playing that song had taken a lot of energy, but it felt wonderful. He felt more alive than he had felt in 5 years. He felt like himself again, the real Marcus, the Marcus who could make magic happen with his fingers and a piano. Slowly, people started to realize what they had just witnessed. This was not just good piano playing. This was world-class, professional, once-in-a-lifetime piano playing. The kind of playing that most people only heard on recordings by the greatest musicians in history. A woman at table 12 whispered to her husband, "Honey, I think we just heard something incredible. I think we just heard someone who should be playing in Carnegie Hall, not playing for food in a restaurant." Her husband nodded. He was thinking the same thing. They had both been to many concerts by famous musicians, but they had never heard anything like what they had just experienced. Marcus looked around the restaurant again. Every face was staring at him with wonder and amazement. Some people looked like they could not believe what they had just heard. Others looked like they were seeing a miracle. And in a way they were. They were seeing a man who had lost everything find the one thing that could never be taken away from him. They were seeing someone remember who they really were after forgetting for a very long time. The awakening had begun. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone in that restaurant. They were all starting to realize that they had stumbled into something very special. Something that would change how they thought about music and about life forever. After Marcus finished the second song, the restaurant exploded with clapping. People were not just clapping with their hands. They were standing up and cheering. Some people were whistling. Others were shouting "Bravo," like they were at a real concert. But in the middle of all this excitement, one person was not clapping. An old woman at table 7 sat very still, staring at Marcus with wide eyes. Her name was Elena Rossetti, and she was 73 years old. She had spent her whole life writing about music for newspapers and magazines. She had heard the best piano players in the world perform. Elena was looking at Marcus very carefully. Something about him seemed familiar, but she could not figure out what it was. She had heard thousands of piano players in her life, but there was something special about the way this man played. Something that reminded her of someone else. Then Marcus started playing a third song, and Elena almost fell out of her chair. The song he chose was a very difficult piece by Rachmaninoff called Piano Concerto No. 2. But he was not just playing the piano part, he was somehow making it sound like a whole orchestra was playing with him. As Marcus played, Elena's memory started working. She remembered a concert she had reviewed 15 years ago. A young man had played this exact same piece. He had been only 24 years old, but he had played it better than musicians twice his age. The newspaper headline the next day had called him the piano genius of his generation. Elena remembered that young man's name. Marcus Chen. She remembered his face, too. He had been thin then, but healthy and clean. He had worn an expensive black suit and had perfect hair. He had smiled at the audience like he owned the world. But as Elena watched the homeless man at the piano, she started to see similarities. The way he moved his head when he played difficult parts, the way his left shoulder dipped down during soft sections, the way he seemed to become one with the piano when he played. "Oh my God," Elena whispered to herself. "It cannot be. But it really is." Elena had reviewed Marcus Chen's debut concert at Carnegie Hall 15 years ago. She had written that he was the most talented young piano player she had ever heard. She had predicted that he would become one of the greatest musicians of his generation. But then, about 10 years ago, Marcus Chen had just disappeared. He stopped giving concerts. He stopped making recordings. Nobody knew what had happened to him. Some people said he had gotten sick. Others thought he had retired early. A few people even said he had died. But here he was playing piano in a restaurant for a plate of food. Elena could hardly believe it. How had the most promising young pianist in America ended up homeless on the streets? As Marcus played, Elena, remembered more details about him. She remembered reading about his parents' death in a car accident. She remembered hearing rumors that he had stopped playing piano after that. But she had never imagined that he had fallen this far. Elena was not the only person in the restaurant who was starting to realize something special was happening. At table 4, a man named David Kim was recording Marcus with his phone. David worked for a local television station, and he had come to Romano's for dinner with his wife. At first, David had started recording just because he thought it was interesting that a homeless man was playing piano in a restaurant. But as he listened, he realized this was much more than just an interesting story. This was incredible music being played by someone with extraordinary talent. David whispered to his wife, "Honey, I think this might be the biggest story of my career. This man is not just good, he is unbelievably good. Professional level good." Ciao. Another table, a woman named Susan Martinez was also recording with her phone. Susan ran a popular social media account where she shared interesting stories from around the city. She had over 50,000 followers, and she knew they would love this. But as Susan listened to Marcus play, she forgot all about her social media account. She forgot about getting likes and shares and comments. She just listened to the music and felt tears running down her face. She had never heard anything so beautiful in her entire life. Marcus was now playing the most difficult part of the Rachmaninoff piece. His fingers were moving so fast they looked like lightning, but every note was perfect. Every sound was exactly where it should be. He made the impossible look easy. Elena Rossetti stood up from her table. She had to get closer. She had to see his face better to make sure she was right. She walked slowly toward the piano, and as she got closer, she became more and more certain. This was definitely Marcus Chen, older now and much thinner. His hair was messy and his clothes were dirty. But it was the same person who had amazed the world 15 years ago. The same genius who had disappeared without explanation. When Marcus finished the song, the restaurant erupted in even louder applause than before. People were screaming and cheering like they were at a rock concert. Some people were crying from the beauty of the music. Others were laughing from pure joy. Elena walked up to the piano. Marcus looked up at her with tired but happy eyes. He was breathing hard from playing such difficult music, but he was smiling. "Excuse me," Elena said quietly. "Are you Marcus Chen?" Marcus's smile disappeared. His eyes got wide with surprise and fear. Nobody had called him by his real name in 5 years. He had almost forgotten that he used to be famous. I do not know what you mean," Marcus said, but his voice was shaking. Elena smiled gently. "I am Elena Rossetti. I write about music for the newspaper. I reviewed your concert at Carnegie Hall 15 years ago. You played this same Rachmaninoff piece that night. You were magnificent then, and you are magnificent now." Marcus stared at her. He remembered Elena. She had written the most beautiful review of his Carnegie Hall debut. She had called him a young master with the soul of an old genius. That review had helped make him famous. "I thought you were dead," Elena said softly. "Everyone in the music world thought you were dead. What happened to you?" Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. For 5 years, nobody had known who he really was. Nobody had remembered his music or his career. He had become invisible to the world. But now someone had recognized him. Someone remembered. "My parents died," Marcus said quietly. "And I could not play anymore. I lost everything." Elena nodded with understanding. She had seen other musicians destroyed by tragedy. Talent was a gift, but it was also fragile. It could be broken by grief and loss. "But you can still play," Elena said. "You play better now than you did 15 years ago. Your music has more heart in it now, more soul." Other people in the restaurant were starting to gather around the piano. They could tell that something important was happening between Elena and Marcus. David Kim was still recording everything with his phone. "What is your real name?" asked Mr. Romano. who had walked over to see what was going on. Marcus looked around at all the faces staring at him. He was scared to tell them the truth. He was afraid they would not believe him. Who would believe that a famous pianist had become homeless? But Elena squeezed his hand gently. "Tell them," she said. "Tell them who you really are." Marcus took a deep breath. "My name is Marcus Alexander Chen," he said. "I used to play piano in concert halls around the world, but that was a long time ago. Now I am just someone who plays for food." The restaurant became very quiet. People were trying to understand what they had just heard. Some of them took out their phones and started searching for Marcus Chen pianist on the internet. A woman at table 12 gasped when she found his old videos online. "Look," she said to her husband. "This is him. This is really him. He was famous." Soon everyone in the restaurant was looking at old videos and pictures of Marcus on their phones. They saw him in expensive suits playing in beautiful concert halls. They saw newspaper articles calling him a genius. They saw pictures of him meeting famous people and winning awards. But most importantly, they could hear his music in those old videos. And they could tell that the homeless man sitting at the piano was the same person who had amazed the world 15 years ago. "Why did you stop playing?" asked a young woman from table 9. Marcus looked down at his hands. "When my parents died, I thought the music died with them. I thought I would never be able to play again without thinking of them." "But you are playing now," said Elena. "Beautiful music. Music that makes people cry with joy." Marcus smiled through his tears. "I think maybe my parents would have wanted me to keep playing. I think maybe they would be happy to know that their son's music can still make people feel something beautiful." The recognition was complete now. Everyone in the restaurant knew they had witnessed something incredible. They had seen a lost master rediscover his gift. They had seen a fallen star rise again. But more than that, they had learned something important about talent and hope and the power of music to heal broken hearts. They had learned that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the deepest pain. And they had learned that genius never really dies. It just waits, sometimes for years, for the right moment to shine again. After everyone learned who Marcus really was, the whole restaurant felt different. It was like the air itself had changed. People were no longer just watching a homeless man play piano for food. They were watching a master musician who had been lost and was now found again. Marcus sat at the piano bench, feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. For 5 years he had been invisible to the world. People walked past him on the street like he did not exist. But now dozens of people were staring at him, and they all knew his name. Elena Rossetti was still standing next to the piano. She put her hand on Marcus's shoulder in a motherly way. "Play one more song," she said gently. "Play something that means something to you, something from your heart." Marcus looked around the restaurant. Every person was waiting to hear what he would play next. Their faces were full of hope and excitement. But Marcus felt scared. What if he could not live up to what they expected? What if the next song was not as good as the others? Then he remembered something his mother had told him when he was very young. She had said, "Marcus, when you play piano, do not think about the people listening. Think about the music. Let the music tell you what it wants to say." Marcus closed his eyes and thought about what song he wanted to play. He thought about his parents and how much he missed them. He thought about all the years he had spent on the streets, feeling lost and forgotten. He thought about this moment, sitting at a piano again, feeling like himself for the first time in so long. He knew exactly what song he needed to play. It was a song he had written himself when he was 25 years old. He had composed it just a few months before his parents died. It was called Hope in the Darkness, and it was about how love and beauty can survive even in the hardest times. Marcus had never played this song for an audience before. He had only played it for his parents, late at night in their living room. They had loved it so much that his mother had cried when she first heard it. Marcus put his hands on the piano keys and began to play. This song was different from the others. It was not a famous piece that everyone knew. This was Marcus's own music coming straight from his heart and soul. The song started very softly, like a whisper in the dark. The melody was sad but beautiful, like someone crying tears of both sorrow and joy at the same time. Marcus played with his eyes closed, remembering his parents' faces when they first heard this music. As he played, Marcus felt something happening inside his chest. All the sadness he had carried for 5 years was starting to come out through the music. All the loneliness, all the grief, all the pain of losing everything he had ever loved was flowing through his fingers into the piano keys. Tears started running down Marcus's face as he played, but he did not stop. The music needed to come out. It had been trapped inside him for too long, and now it was finally free. The people in the restaurant could feel the emotion in every note. This was not just beautiful music. This was a man's whole life story being told through sound. His love for his parents, his pain at losing them, his years of wandering lost and alone, and now, his hope that maybe things could be better again. At table 3, a woman named Margaret was crying so hard she could barely breathe. The music reminded her of her own son, who had died in a war 3 years ago. She had not been able to cry for him properly until now. Marcus's music was helping her finally let out all the grief she had been holding inside. At the bar, a man named James was thinking about his father, who had Alzheimer's disease and no longer remembered who James was. The beautiful, sad music made James remember all the good times they had shared before the illness took his father's mind away. Even the young people in the restaurant were crying. A teenage couple at table 5 held hands and cried together, thinking about how scary it was to love someone so much that losing them would break your heart. Marcus played the middle part of his song, where the melody got stronger and more hopeful. This part was about finding light in the darkness, about discovering that even when everything seems lost, there is still beauty in the world. There are still reasons to keep going. As he played this part, Marcus thought about the last 5 years. Yes, he had lost his parents. Yes, he had lost his career and his money and his home. But he had not lost the most important thing. He had not lost his ability to make music that could touch people's hearts. The music got louder and more powerful. Marcus was no longer just playing notes on a piano. He was pouring his whole soul into the instrument. Every emotion he had ever felt was coming out through his fingers. Elena Rossetti watched Marcus play and felt amazed. She had reviewed thousands of concerts in her career, but she had never seen anything like this. Marcus was not performing for the audience. He was sharing his deepest feelings with them. He was giving them a piece of his heart. The song reached its highest point, where the melody soared like a bird flying toward the sun. This part was about hope, about believing that tomorrow could be better than today, about the power of love, and music to heal even the deepest wounds. Everyone in the restaurant felt lifted up by this part of the song. They felt like they were flying, like all their own problems and worries were not so important anymore, like there was something bigger and more beautiful than their everyday troubles. Then Marcus played the ending of his song. The melody became soft and gentle again, like a mother singing a lullaby to her child. But it was not sad anymore. It was peaceful. It was the sound of someone who had been through terrible pain, but had found a way to be okay again. As Marcus played the very last notes, tears were streaming down his face, but he was smiling too. For the first time since his parents died, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sitting at a piano, making music that meant something. The last note faded away, and the restaurant became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The music had been so emotional and so beautiful that everyone needed time to understand what they had just experienced. Marcus kept his hands on the keys for a moment, then slowly lifted them and put them in his lap. He opened his eyes and looked around at all the faces watching him. Every single person in the restaurant was crying. Even the tough-looking men at the bar had tears in their eyes. For 30 seconds, nobody made a sound. The only noise was the quiet sound of people sniffling and wiping their eyes. Then Elena Rossetti started clapping. But it was not regular clapping. It was slow, respectful clapping, like people do at church or at very serious concerts. Soon everyone else joined in with the same kind of clapping. But the clapping did not last long. One by one, people stopped clapping and just looked at Marcus with wonder and gratitude. They looked at him like he had given them a gift, like he had shared something precious with them. A little girl at table 8 walked over to the piano. She was maybe 7 years old and she had been crying during the song. She looked up at Marcus with big, serious eyes. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard," she said in a small voice. "Thank you for playing that song." Marcus looked down at her and felt his heart break open with love. This little girl understood what he had been trying to say with his music. She had heard his message of hope and beauty. "Thank you for listening," Marcus said softly. Really listening. The emotional crescendo was over, but its effects would last much longer. Everyone in that restaurant had been changed by what they heard. They had experienced something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, and Marcus had been changed too. He had found his way back to himself. He had remembered that music was not just his job or his talent. It was his way of connecting with other people. His way of saying that even in the darkest times, there is still light. There is still hope, there is still love. After Marcus finished playing his own song, something amazing started happening in the restaurant. People were not just clapping anymore. They were taking out their phones and recording videos. They were calling their friends and family members. They were posting on social media about what they had just witnessed. David Kim, the television reporter, had recorded Marcus's entire performance on his phone. As soon as Marcus finished playing, David called his boss at the TV station. "You are not going to believe what I just saw," David said into his phone. "I am at Romano's restaurant, and there is a homeless man here who might be the best piano player I have ever heard. His name is Marcus Chen, and he used to be famous. This could be the biggest story of the year." David's boss told him to keep recording and to get an interview with Marcus if possible. This was exactly the kind of human interest story that people love to watch on the news. Susan Martinez, who ran the popular social media account, had also been recording. She quickly edited together a short video of Marcus playing and posted it online with the caption, "Amazing homeless man plays piano like an angel at Romano's restaurant. This will make you cry. Share this." Within 10 minutes, Susan's video had been shared 50 times. Within an hour, it had been shared 500 times. People were commenting things like, "OMG, this is incredible," and "Someone needs to help this man," and "Best piano playing I have ever heard." But the most important thing that happened was with Elena Rossetti. As soon as Marcus finished playing, Elena took out her phone and called her editor at the newspaper. "Elena," her editor said, "it is pretty late. What is going on?" "I need you to clear space on the front page of tomorrow's paper," Elena said. "I just found Marcus Chen." Marcus Chen, the pianist, I thought he was dead. Not dead, just lost. But I found him, and he is still brilliant. Maybe more brilliant than before. I am going to write the story of my career tonight. Elena's editor knew that Elena was the best music critic in the city. If she said this was important, then it was important. "How much space do you need?" he asked. "All of it," Elena said. "This is not just a music story. This is a story about hope and second chances and the power of art to survive anything. This is a story that will change people's lives." While Elena was on the phone, Mr. Romano was having his own conversation with Marcus. The restaurant owner felt terrible about how he had treated Marcus earlier. He remembered laughing when Marcus asked to play for food. Now he felt embarrassed and ashamed. "Mr. Chen," Mr. Romano said, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea who you were. I treated you badly, and I am very sorry." Marcus shook his head. "You do not need to apologize. You gave me a chance to play. That is all I wanted." "It is not enough," Mr. Romano said. "You asked for a plate of food, but you have given my restaurant something worth much more than that. You have given us a night that nobody will ever forget." Mr. Romano went to the kitchen and came back with the biggest plate of food Marcus had ever seen. There was pasta with meat sauce, garlic bread, salad, and a piece of chocolate cake. Daito was enough food for 3 people. "This is for you," Mr. Romano said. "And I want to offer you something else. Would you like to play piano here every Friday night? I will pay you well, and you can have dinner here whenever you want." Marcus stared at the plate of food. Just 2 hours ago he had been starving and desperate. Now he had more food than he could eat and a job offer. It felt like a dream. "I would love that," Marcus said. "Thank you so much." But the offers did not stop there. A woman at table 12 came over to the piano. Her name was Patricia Williams, and she owned several businesses in the city. "Mr. Chen," Patricia said, "I heard what Mr. Romano offered you, and I think that is wonderful. But I want to offer you something else too. I own an apartment building downtown. I have an empty apartment that you can live in for free until you get back on your feet." Marcus felt tears coming to his eyes again. "I do not know what to say." "Why would you do that for me?" Patricia smiled. "Because your music tonight reminded me why life is beautiful. That is worth more than rent money." A man at table 4 also came over. His name was Dr. Robert Thompson, and he was a doctor at the city hospital. "Mr. Chen," Dr. Thompson said, "I can see that you have not been eating well for a while. I would like to give you a complete medical checkup for free. We need to make sure you are healthy." Marcus was overwhelmed by all the kindness. In one evening, he had gone from having nothing to having food, a job, a place to live, and medical care. It was more than he had dared to hope for. But the most surprising thing happened when a teenage boy at table 9 came over with his parents. The boy's name was Alex, and he was 16 years old. "Mr. Chen," Alex said nervously, "I have been learning piano for 8 years. I thought I was pretty good. But after hearing you play tonight, I realize I do not know anything. Would you maybe give me piano lessons? My parents said they would pay you." Marcus looked at Alex and saw himself at that age, full of hope and dreams about music. "I would be honored to teach you," Marcus said, "but I want you to know something. You do not have to play like me to be good. You just have to play like yourself." While all these conversations were happening, David Kim was setting up his camera to interview Marcus for the television news. Other people in the restaurant were still recording with their phones. The videos were spreading on social media faster than anyone could keep track of. By 10 o'clock that night, videos of Marcus playing piano had been viewed over 10,000 times online. People were sharing them with comments like, "This man needs our help," and "Most beautiful music I have ever heard." Elena Rossetti stayed at the restaurant until very late, talking to Marcus about what had happened to him over the past 5 years. She was writing down everything he said. She knew this story would touch millions of people. "What do you want people to know about you?" Elena asked Marcus. Marcus thought for a moment. "I want them to know that it is possible to lose everything and still find your way back. I want them to know that music, real music, comes from the heart. And I want them to know that sometimes the best things in life happen when you are not looking for them." As the restaurant started to close, Marcus realized that this was the best day he had experienced in 5 years. But he also knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Being homeless for 5 years had taught him that life could change very quickly, for better or for worse. But tonight, sitting at Romano's restaurant with a full stomach and surrounded by new friends, Marcus felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt hope. The unexpected consequences of his desperate request to play for food were just beginning. By tomorrow morning, Marcus's story would be in the newspaper. By tomorrow evening, it would be on television. By the end of the week, it would be known around the world. Marcus had no idea that his simple desire to play piano for a plate of food would change not just his own life, but the lives of everyone who heard his story. He had no idea that he was about to become a symbol of hope for people everywhere who had lost their way and were trying to find it again. But even if he had known what was coming, Marcus would have made the same choice. He would have walked into that restaurant and asked to play piano for food. Because that is what musicians do. They play music no matter what. They share their gift with the world, even when the world has forgotten about them. And sometimes, if they are very lucky, the world remembers how much it needs their music. Sometimes the world gives them a second chance to shine. 3 months later, Marcus stood backstage at Carnegie Hall in New York City. He was wearing a new black suit and his hair was clean and neatly cut. In just 10 minutes, he would walk onto the same stage where he had played his debut concert 15 years ago. But this time was different. This time, Marcus was not playing just for the rich people who could afford expensive tickets. Half of the tickets for tonight's concert had been given away for free to homeless people, struggling, families, and anyone who needed to hear beautiful music but could not afford to pay for it. Marcus looked at himself in the mirror backstage. He could hardly believe how much his life had changed since that night at Romano's restaurant. Elena Rossetti's newspaper story had been read by millions of people around the world. The videos of him playing piano had been watched over 50 million times on social media. But the most amazing thing was what had happened because of all that attention. People from everywhere had reached out to help Marcus. A famous music manager had offered to represent him. Record companies wanted him to make new albums. Concert halls around the world were inviting him to perform. Marcus had said yes to some of these offers, but not all of them. He was careful about which opportunities he accepted. He only wanted to work with people who understood that music was about more than just making money. Music was about connecting with people's hearts and souls. The money from his first few concerts had allowed Marcus to rent a nice apartment and buy new clothes. But he had used most of it to start something very special. He had created the Hope in the Darkness Foundation, named after the song he had played that night at Romano's. The foundation helped musicians who were going through hard times. It provided food, housing, and medical care for artists who had fallen on difficult days. It also gave free music lessons to children whose families could not afford them. Marcus had learned that he was not the only talented musician who had ended up homeless. There were many others who had lost their way because of illness, addiction, family problems, or just bad luck. The foundation was helping dozens of them get back on their feet. Tonight's concert at Carnegie Hall was a benefit for the foundation. All the money from ticket sales would go to help other musicians in need. Marcus was not keeping any of it for himself. He already had everything he needed. Before the concert started, Marcus visited with some of the homeless people who had been given free tickets. He met them in a special room backstage and talked with them about their lives and their dreams. One man named Robert had been a guitar player before he lost his job and his home. "I never thought I would be able to hear music like this again," Robert told Marcus. "Thank you for making it possible." A woman named Sarah had been a singer before her husband left her, and she could no longer afford rent. "Your story gives me hope," she said to Marcus. "If you can come back from being homeless, maybe I can too." Marcus hugged each person and told them that he believed in them. "Never give up on your dreams," he said, "and never give up on yourself. Sometimes life knocks us down, but we can always get back up." As Marcus walked toward the stage, he thought about his parents. He wished they could be there to see him perform again, but in a way, he felt like they were with him. Every time he played piano, he felt their love and support. He also thought about Elena Rossetti, who was sitting in the front row tonight. Elena had become like a grandmother to Marcus. She had helped him navigate his return to fame and had made sure he did not make the same mistakes he had made before. Marcus stepped onto the stage and saw the audience. Carnegie Hall was completely full. Over 2,000 people had come to hear him play. Some were wealthy people in expensive clothes. Others were homeless people in their best outfits, sitting next to millionaires and celebrities. But Marcus saw something beautiful about this mixed audience. Music was bringing together people who normally would never sit next to each other. Rich and poor, young and old, all united by their love of beautiful sounds. Marcus sat down at the beautiful grand piano in the center of the stage. The audience became completely quiet. He looked out at all the faces and felt grateful for this second chance at life. He decided to start with the same song he had played that first night at Romano's restaurant, Clair de Lune, by Debussy. The song that had started his journey back to himself. As he played, Marcus remembered that desperate, hungry man who had walked into Romano's 3 months ago. That man had been broken and lost, but he had been brave, enough to ask for a chance to play music. And that bravery had changed everything. After Clair de Lune, Marcus played several other classical pieces, but the most important song came at the end of the concert. He played Hope in the Darkness, the song he had written about his parents and had played that emotional night at Romano's. As he played his own composition, Marcus felt tears on his face again. But these were happy tears. Tears of gratitude and joy. He had found his way back to the music. He had found his way back to himself. When the concert ended, the audience gave Marcus a standing ovation that lasted for 15 minutes. People were crying and cheering and throwing flowers onto the stage. But Marcus was thinking about something else. After the concert, Marcus did something that surprised everyone. Instead of going to the fancy party that had been planned in his honor, he went back to Romano's restaurant. It was Friday night, and Marcus had kept his promise to Mr. Romano. Every Friday for the past 3 months, Marcus had played piano at Romano's. He had continued this tradition even as he became famous again. Tonight, the restaurant was packed with people who had heard about Marcus's weekly performances, but Mr. Romano had saved the same corner table for the same group of people who had been there that first night. Elena Rossetti was there, of course. So were Patricia Williams, Dr. Thompson, and Alex, the teenager who was now taking piano lessons from Marcus twice a week. David Kim was there with his wife, and Susan Martinez was there with her family. Even some of the homeless people from the Carnegie Hall concert had come to Romano's to celebrate with Marcus. The restaurant had become a place where everyone was welcome, regardless of how much money they had. Marcus played several songs that night, but the last one was special. He had written it just for Romano's restaurant, and for all the people who had believed in him when he had nothing. The song was called "The Place Where Dreams Come Back to Life." It was about second chances and the kindness of strangers. It was about how one small act of courage can change everything. As Marcus played this new song, he looked around at all the faces in the restaurant. These were the people who had saved his life. Not by giving him money or fame, but by giving him something more important. They had given him hope. When he finished playing, Marcus stood up from the piano bench and looked around the restaurant. "I want to thank all of you," he said. 3 months ago, I came here asking if I could play for a plate of food. You gave me much more than food. You gave me back my life." The audience clapped, but Marcus held up his hand. He was not finished speaking. "I learned something important that night," Marcus continued. "I learned that no matter how far you fall, you are never too far from hope. I learned that music has the power to heal broken hearts and bring people together. And I learned that sometimes the best things in life happen when you are brave enough to ask for help." Marcus looked directly at Mr. Romano. "Thank you for saying yes when I asked to play your piano. You changed my life with that one word." Then Marcus looked at Elena. "Thank you for remembering who I used to be and helping me remember too." He looked at Patricia Williams. "Thank you for giving me a place to live when I had nowhere to go." He looked at Dr. Thompson. "Thank you for taking care of my health when I could not afford to take care of myself." He looked at Alex. "Thank you for reminding me that music is about teaching and sharing, not just performing." Finally, Marcus looked at everyone in the restaurant. "Thank you all for proving that there are still good people in the world. People who will help a stranger just because it is the right thing to do." As Marcus finished speaking, he realized that his journey had come full circle. He had started as a famous pianist, fallen to the bottom, and climbed back up again. But this time was different. This time he was not just playing for himself. He was playing for everyone who had ever lost hope and needed to find it again. The boy who had become famous too young had become a man who understood what really mattered in life. Not fame or money or applause. What mattered was connection, love, hope, and the courage to keep playing beautiful music even when the world seemed dark. Marcus sat back down at the piano and played one more song. It was a simple melody, one that anyone could hum along with. It was the sound of a man who had found his way home. Outside Romano's restaurant, life in the city continued as it always did. People hurried past on their way to important places. Cars honked their horns. Sirens wailed in the distance. But inside the restaurant, something magical was happening. A room full of people from all different backgrounds were sitting together, listening to beautiful music and believing in the power of second chances. And at the center of it all sat Marcus, playing piano with a smile on his face and love in his heart. He had asked for a plate of food and received so much more.